Hello, dragonflies! Welcome to the Gilmore Gals podcast, where we take a deep dive into each episode of the beloved show.
We're your hosts, Sarah
and Ani.
We're huge Gilmore Girls fans, and we're besties. In this podcast, we talk about everything Gilmore, from the pop culture references to the tiniest minutia only a true Gilmore nerd would care about.
Capper boom!
Hello, Ani.
Sarah, how's it going?
It's going pretty good. I know you're super excited for football season to be back.
Oh my God, I'm so excited. The Detroit Lions, aren't they amazing?
They are amazing. They won their first game this season.
Was that like an official first game?
It was. It was the first game of the season. It was, like I said, they played the Kansas City Chiefs, who were the last Super Bowl champions, and the Detroit Lions beat them, and they looked really good.
Like, no offense, but aren't the Detroit Lions known for not being like a hugely great team?
We are, exactly. And but we have a new coach. I forget his name at the moment. I'm really sorry. But he has done a lot of work in the last few seasons, and they've been getting a little bit better, and then they've started out this season looking pretty strong. So
I just Googled it, and it looks like it's Coach Dan Campbell.
Thank you, Coach Campbell.
Yeah, there we go. Coach Campbell, congratulations.
Right. Today we're going to be covering Season 1, Episode 8, Love and War and Snow, written by Amy Sherman Palladino and Joan Binder-Weiss, and directed by Alan Meyerson.
It's that time of year again. The first snow brings the annual reenactment of the Battle of Stars Hollow. As usual, Lorelai eagerly anticipates the first snow, as it always feels like a special gift just for her. Meanwhile, Rory is far too hung up on Dean to listen to Lane, and Lorelai has at least the beginnings of a romantic night with Max Medina.
All right, let's move on to our fast facts. So first of all, we have a pretty big guest star. His name was David Huddleston, who plays Mayor Harry Porter. He was a character actor who had a long career spanning all the way back from the 1960s. And in his 60-year career, he appeared in numerous television shows and movies, including Bewitched, where he played 3 separate characters on 3 separate occasions, Charlie's Angels, The Wonder Years, West Wing, and so many more. His movie credits include Blazing Saddles, Santa Claus the Movie, where he played Santa Claus, and he was the titular Big Lebowski in The Big Lebowski. Sadly, he passed away in 2016, but his last credit, I believe, was 2014, so he worked up almost until the end of his life.
Every time I looked at the script and I saw Mayor Harry Porter, I was like, Harry Potter! Every single time. Well, thank you for that. Very interesting. I knew he was a character actor. I never bothered to look into him. The next fast fact is something dorky that is probably only for me in the world, but I had to look into it because I've always been curious about this. At one point in the episode, Emily says something about a Turkish prison. And I noticed just culturally, everyone always says Turkish prison when they're describing horrible conditions, like in a prison. And I've always wondered, why Turkish? Like, how racist? Why Turkish? Why, I'm sure there's plenty of terrible prisons, including here in America. We have terrible prisons. Anyway, I looked it up, and it turns out a movie that came out in 1978 called Midnight Express, it was nominated for Best Picture. So it was a really widely seen movie. It got a lot of attention. And in that movie, they depict Turkish prisons as being really brutal and the guards there as monsters, just absolute monsters. And since it was advertised, the movie was advertised as based on a true story, it has influenced how Americans view not just Turkish prisons, but Turkey in general as this brutal place. Isn't that interesting?
Oh, that is interesting.
You know what I'm talking about. You always hear Turkish prison, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks for looking that up. That was very interesting.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, how about we dive right into our recap? So this episode starts with our very first Stars Hollow town meeting.
These scenes tend to be pretty hilarious, and we fortunately get a lot of them throughout the series.
We also get to see the mayor of Stars Hollow, who we mentioned, Mayor Harry Porter, not to be confused with Harry Potter. And he eventually basically just kind of merges with the character of Taylor Dozy.
Yeah, I don't know if we even ever see him again.
I think he might be one more episode.
Yeah?
I'm not 100%.
So one big difference between him and Taylor Dozy is we find out later that Taylor He's never actually the mayor of Stars Hollow. He's rather the town selectman, which I guess is something that happens in, tiny towns. Anyway, as usual, the girls talk through the entire meeting, which personally, knowing myself, would piss me off to no end if I was actually at that meeting trying to listen.
Oh, agreed.
Like kids who used to talk in class. Ooh, it would make me so angry.
I know. They're so rude. I love them, but they can be very rude.
Yes, exactly.
Well, we can see Luke's blood starting to boil as Mayor Porter starts talking about the reenactment of the legendary Battle of Stars Hollow. And he gets more and more fidgety and irate, and the girls are talking about him and kind of like, how long is this going to take? And then eventually he explodes with his usual diatribe about how much he hates the reenactment and how stupid he thinks it is.
He says, 12 guys stood in a row all night waiting for an enemy that never showed. They got stood up. They should have been wearing prom dresses.
So it's kind of like the world's easiest reenactment. Like they're just standing outside all night in the freezing cold.
Yeah, but freezing their butts off. There's no point.
Right. I know. Well, then Luke makes the excellent point, in my opinion, of, quote, have any of you ever considered the fact that you're glorifying a war that we fought so we could keep land that we stole?
Mm-hmm. I'm telling you what.
Mm-hmm. Next, it's the middle of the night, and for those of us who know her, we recognize that Lorelai has been awoken by the soon-to-be falling snow, which she claims she is able to smell coming. And can I just say that when I wake up in the middle of the night, even if it's for something exciting, I am not as peppy as Lorelai is.
Yeah. Anyway, so she heads downstairs to open up a window and take a big whiff. And then she sits there on her couch listening to a message on her ancient answering machine from Max Medina. Ugh. On repeat over and over.
And Rory is woken by the frigid air, presumably, or maybe from the answering machine message.
Maybe.
She wanders into the living room, and she goes over to the window, and Lorelai tells her to close her eyes and take a deep breath, and gives us one of the most iconic lines of the series, "I smell snow." And Rory tells her that it's like dogs with high-pitched noises. Only Lorelai can smell snow.
And we learned that all the best things that ever happened to Lorelai happened when it snowed. Her best birthday, her first kiss, Rory's birth, and first steps. We get the impression that they've had this conversation at least a few times because Rory knows exactly what Lorelai is going to say next. Plus, they have this cute tradition for the first snow of the year, donuts, coffee, and standing out in the snowstorm at midnight.
Then Lorelai apologizes for waking Rory up, and Rory says, "It's all fodder for the tell-all." And I was like, could it be that, that Amy Sherman Palladino knew back then that she was eventually going to have Rory write their story?
Oh my gosh. Can you imagine? Do you
know?
think? I don't imagine that. She is a writer. I guess it makes sense. Oh, that's so sweet.
And next up, we're at the Independence Inn, and Lorelai and Michelle are going back and forth about how they each love and hate the snow, respectively.
Okay, I have to say, having spent 2 winters in Northwest Arkansas, I can definitively say I hate the snow with the fire of 1,000 suns. And in fact, I would be quite happy to never see snow again as long as I live. So in honor of that loathing, I'm going to share the following exchanges from the show. Lorelai asks how it is outside, and Michelle responds, "It is cold and gray like a fat dead pigeon." And then he tells her, "Not everyone finds the idea of being pelted with frozen water appealing." And finally, that the thrilling sensation of getting lost in a blizzard, of freezing to death in the woods and having to eat your friend's buttocks to stay alive, the appeal of that is lost on some people. Yeah. All of that stuff I just shared, that's what I think of snow and of cold in general. And as my husband and I always say, why would you live somewhere where if you get stuck outside, you die? Like you die. What the hell? I don't understand it. I'll never understand it. So I'm just going to say I'm very blessed to live where I do. And I get that other people don't like the heat and they like the cold, and that's fine. But I just have to wonder, Michelle is clearly an immigrant. He came to this country from somewhere else, and he's a cranky puss. And as an immigrant, he could have chosen anywhere else to live. If he hates the snow, why on earth would he go to Stars Hollow?
Yeah, why he's in a small town at all is a mystery to me, because he definitely gives off big city vibes. Like,
I know.
He belongs in New York.
Yes, he's very metropolitan.
Chicago or something.
Do we find out eventually that he's from Paris?
I think we do.
I think we do. I mean, at the very least, he's not Canadian. He is actually French, right? And
Even though the actor is Canadian.
right. But I'm like, I don't know, was there such a paucity of, concierge jobs in Paris that he had to move to Stars Hollow?
Well, then Suki enters with a purple band-aid, and she asks what Lorelai thinks about maple sugar snowflakes on the guest pillows. And I really have nothing to add there, except that, first of all, yes, please, maple sugar snowflakes sound amazing. And also Suki has a band-aid on her hand, so yeah. I had to point that out.
I wonder if she has a mold for those snowflakes, or she just freehands them.
I don't know. Knowing her, she probably freehands them.
That's amazing. Think about how hard that would be to design.
Mm-hmm.
I just love Suki. Lane and Rory walk into the inn, and Lane is wearing her adorable high school band uniform that has the plumes that look like blood is squirting out of her head. And she's pouring her heart out about this new boy that she likes, Rich Blumenfeld. But Rory is super distracted, and she's looking for her chemistry book. She's not really listening.
Then Lorelai comes up and greets the girls, and she says, she greets Lane with, "Hey, Sergeant Pepper," which of course is a nod to the Beatles album, Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band from 1967. Yes, I am not only a Gilmore nerd and a Disney nerd, but I am also a Beatles nerd. I'm very nerdy.
There's a lot of, well, I wouldn't say a lot, but there are a few Beatles references, I think, throughout the series.
Yeah, I mean, they're everywhere, really. Very influential.
Indeed.
Rory and Lane now head into the kitchen, and Rory asks if there are any Rocky Road cookies left that Suki had made. Those sound so amazing. Mm-hmm. I've never had a Rocky Road cookie, but I can only imagine how amazing they must be. I'm guessing chocolate cookies, marshmallows, and almonds.
Oh, almonds.
I'd have to find a recipe and make them.
I know. Oh, Rocky Road, like the ice cream.
Like the
almonds
ice cream.
And marshmallows.
Mm-hmm. While Suki is getting the cookies, Lane picks back up about her new crush, Rich, and Rory, rather rudely, I thought, interrupts her to inquire about the time. Apparently, she's meeting Dean at the bus stop.
So Lorelai enters the kitchen, and she sees Rory with the cookies and figures out that Rory must be taking the cookies to Dean because Rory doesn't actually like Rocky Road cookies. And I'm like, are you crazy? What's not to like?
Right?
And this launches both Lorelai and Suki into a series of teasing chants, culminating with one of my favorite Suki things ever. She just wanders off, singing to herself, "Cookies for the Dean and the Rorys and the cookies for the love and the Dean," and so on.
Love it. And then during this whole exchange, too, something that I would like to add, that now Suki has two Band-Aids on her right hand, or maybe actually it might be her left hand. Anyway, she has two Band-Aids. And in one take, you can see that she wipes her hand with her kitchen towel, and one of the Band-Aids half falls off, and you can see it hanging and kind of flopping around. This happens at around 10 minutes and 10 seconds. And then through the rest of the scene, you can kind of see it just kind of there.
Lady, I have never noticed this.
That's so funny.
You are really watching those hands, aren't you?
I really am. I'm obsessed with Suki's Band-Aids. I don't know what's wrong with me. Well, then we see Lane and Rory are walking through town to the bus stop where Rory is supposed to meet Dean.
Rory is super distracted again, and she's barely paying attention to this subject that's clearly very important to Lane. She's not being a very good friend.
Mm-hmm. And then Dean and Rory are in their own little love world and kissing, and you can see that Lane is feeling really left out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm surprised that you didn't have any comment about Dean reading Jane Austen.
You know what? I remember watching the episode and thinking, that's odd, and then skipping over it because I was distracted. But yes, that is odd to me because we established later that he's not a deep thinker and he's not a reader, just as the reader, right?
Right.
And Austen is she's pretty easy to read. She's not it's pretty fluffy, but it's really good literature. Mm-hmm. I don't see him reading Austen. What about you?
Yeah, I thought that was kind of weird too, but it's new in the relationship. Maybe he's trying to impress her.
Right.
Well, then back at the inn, Lorelai is excited that it has officially begun snowing. And she says that the first snow is lucky and to make a wish. And I'm wondering if that's a Lorelai thing or if that's a real thing, because I've never heard that. And I grew up in snow.
Yeah.
So if anybody has heard that, please let us know. Otherwise, we'll assume it's a Lorelai thing.
Well, remember later she tells Max that she made a wish that something would happen for her because she was sick or something. I don't know. She had the
right. Yeah.
And then the snow came. So maybe she just associates the snow with a wish.
Yeah. You know what? You're right. That's probably what that is. That totally makes sense.
Emily calls to tell Lorelai that there's a big snowstorm coming and says that Rory should spend the night at their house because the roads will be so bad. And Chilton is much closer to their place than Stars Hollow.
And then she says that she sent Lance out to pick her up from school. So I guess they have a driver now?
We never hear of Lance ever again, ever.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know.
I know. I was just like, wait, what? Who? Okay. Well, then in the next scene, we see the reenactors and they are getting into their places. And Luke is, of course, super annoyed and really letting them know it.
So here we get what I believe is our first official Luke rant. Can you confirm that?
I think so.
So we get these every so often. Luke is a very funny ranter. Lorelai loves his rants. She encourages them. And I think Scott Patterson is particularly good at these rants, and I enjoyed this one because I think it's appropriate for our times. He says, tradition is a trap. It allows people to stick their heads in the sand. It's a freaking fairy tale. Things sucked then too. They just sucked without indoor plumbing.
I had the same thought. I was like, oh man, that's like just like, oh. My issue was, though, what harm does it do to let the reenactors carry on? It doesn't hurt anyone. And it's something that's obviously very important to these guys.
You know, especially since one of them is Kirk. I'm like, these people don't have a lot in their lives. Just let them do it.
Right? Just let them be. Yeah.
That's what I was thinking. Like, I put a lot of thought into this because I would have the same reaction as Luke. Like, it's freaking cold. Go inside. What are you doing? Right? So I think he's frustrated partially because, you know, Luke has a good heart and some of these reenactors are very old guys and that degree of cold can be dangerous for them. And so then we also find out that Luke's dad had been one of these reenactors and maybe that's why it bugs him so much, or it just like hurts to be reminded of him maybe.
Yeah, maybe. So then we learn why Lorelai loves the snow so much. She had, apparently when she was a little girl, around 5, she had a really bad ear infection and had been stuck in bed for a week. And she wished for something good to happen. And the next morning it had snowed. And she said that she felt like that was her own little present.
And we actually hear reference of bad ear infections that she had when she was little in the episode where Emily and Richard have their vow renewal.
Oh, right.
Remember when they get up to dance and he mentions she had a series of ear infections and they went through a series of nannies because she was screaming all the time and all this stuff. We'll get there eventually.
Outside the school, the band is now gathering and Lane's crush is there and he's bending down and tying his shoe, I think, and she just can't help herself. She absentmindedly runs her fingers through his hair and then she suddenly realizes what she's done and just runs away. Totally humiliated. Poor girl.
Can you imagine?
No, I would die.
You here, like, did you do anything that sticks out in your mind in high school that was similarly humiliating?
The only thing I can think is that I did drama and we were doing Cinderella and I was the fairy godmother. In my big solo, my voice like broke, like, like in the end. Yeah. And like one of my last notes. And so that was pretty embarrassing. But other than that, no, thankfully I don't have any really bad experiences like that. How about you?
Very glad to hear that. None that stick out in my memory, but I think that's because blessedly I have forgotten a lot of my life. So yeah, there were several episodes of depression in there that made sure that I did not lay down certain memories. So that was good. It was probably good. But for the most part, I recall high school being pretty fun, and I don't recall doing anything terribly stupid. Yeah. I'm sure there was something because when you're a teenager, you do a lot of stupid things. So Lorelai is walking through town and she sees Max Medina.
And he tells her that his car broke down on the way home from Stanford. Coincidence?
I think not.
And then so they decide to go on their long-awaited first date.
So on a complete side note, this is really annoying to me. You can tell that the entire scene, this one and the one with Luke before this one, have been dubbed over in a sound booth. And it bugs me so much. Could you tell?
Because when I saw this, I had to go back and rewatch that. And I guess a little bit, but it wasn't as obvious to me this time as it was to you. And usually I do notice those kind of things.
The things that drive me crazy are so just like random and lame.
Now we're at Richard and Emily's, and Emily is on the phone with Florence, the cook of the week, and we find out that she's not going to make it because of the snow.
And of course, Emily the Entitled is super peeved about the fact that Florence is not going to make it, which is so characteristic of her. She just got off the phone with Lorelai telling her how dangerous the roads are. The conditions are so bad that Rory shouldn't risk driving home. Yet the help should go out and risk her life to make sure the Gilmores get their dinner.
I know.
God, she's
I know. I
awful.
was like, oh my God. So then Rory suggests that they just simply check the fridge and see what there is to whip up. And Emily is just simply aghast. God forbid they should stoop so low as to cook something for themselves.
Can you imagine?
I love when she's like, whip up.
The hell?
What? What does that mean?
Yeah, can you imagine being so wealthy that you've never had to cook? Like,
No.
never had to cook? What is I mean, I'm not a fan of cooking, but like you got to be able to survive if the help doesn't show up, Imagine her having like a little hamburger helper box in the cupboard and some ground beef.
No way.
They all head into the kitchen and Rory finds a frozen pizza in the freezer, and which is like shocking. Emily is like, what is happening? She doesn't know where it came from because according to her, frozen pizza is food you eat at a carnival or a Turkish prison. So this nut job lady equates carnival food with prison food. Have you ever tried, Sarah? Have you ever tried a deep fried Oreo?
I have not, but it is on my bucket list.
Lady, oh my God. Deep fried Oreos are the best thing that has ever happened to the human race after air conditioning.
Even more than indoor plumbing?
Even more than indoor plumbing. I would take a crap outside if I could have deep fried Oreos every day. You kidding me? Just so classy.
Well, then Emily said, try to get this back to Emily says, I have never bought frozen pizza. It must belong to Anna, who is the maid. So in this episode, they have both a maid and a cook and a driver. And of course, she doesn't know where her cookie sheets are. Rich people.
All right. Well, Lorelai and Max are now officially on their date and they're getting burgers and they're getting to know each other.
I know that you're not a fan of Max, but I really like the two of them together. I think their chemistry is so great. And maybe it's the old crush I had on Scott Cohen shining through.
I think that must be it because, okay, so spoiler alert. Not that anyone listening wouldn't already be a fan, but all I could think about during this scene is that Max Medina is so annoying and so much of a loser that he ends up having not one, but two women get close to marrying him, only to have each of them come to her senses and then realize what a miserable existence that would be and dump his ass. Two. I'm saying
not one, but two.
I think what bothers me really is not so much, they do have good chemistry. It's more the writing of their scenes together. It's like they're trying so hard. Like both of them are just trying to be quippy and it doesn't feel natural. It bothers me. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I can see that.
So while they're waiting for the frozen pizza to cook, Rory makes her way upstairs to her mom's childhood bedroom and finds some old pictures of Lorelai and her father, Chris, from one of those, those photo booths. And she stashes it away in her coat pocket. And on the back of the photo, they wrote the year 1983. Rory was supposedly born on October 8th, 1984, which, by the way, was the same year I was born. And yet, I don't know if that's accurate, though, because think about it. Like, I was born in March of 84 and she was born in October.
Yeah, like she wouldn't have gotten pregnant until probably the end of 83. So I guess it could have been maybe like,
I was just thinking, like, why was I 1 year ahead of Rory in school? I guess that makes sense. If I was born in March and she was born in October, she would be a year behind.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
And major old tech alert. Pagers. Rory gets a page from Lane, who had run to Rory's house after the hair fiasco. Do you remember pagers?
I vaguely remember them. I never owned one.
My dad had one for work. So we unfortunately were very familiar with pagers.
That's funny. What was he doing for work that he needed a pager?
Well, he was a supervisor, he was a boss. And so anytime anything would go wrong, or, if there was ever any issues, he was always the one who would be called, which happened a lot.
So what I do remember pagers from was that show ER. Do you remember? They would always page the doctors on their actual pagers, which I thought was so weird. I'm like, is that really the best way to get in touch? But then if you think about it, what do they do now?
I think they get text messages, at least I watched The Good Doctor, which is a very good show.
Oh, yeah?
And yeah, I really like it. And I think they usually they get text messages and stuff when things have happened with their patients.
So Lane is on a well-deserved rant about how Rory hasn't been there for her lately and how she was humiliated for touching Rich's hair. And then their call gets cut off as the phone lines go dead due to the storm.
And right at that moment, Emily rushes in completely frantic because the oven timer is going off and she has no idea how to stop it. And then back in Stars Hollow, Lorelai and Max have taken their burgers to the Black, White, Red bookstore, which often doubles as the town movie theater. And they are having a screening of House on Haunted Hill, the classic horror movie. The original, not the 1997 remake, which I actually really enjoyed.
Oh, really? I thought you didn't like scary. Well, you do. You watch a lot more scary things than I do.
Yeah.
So I don't know anything about scary stuff because I'm a giant chicken. But Ryan says that although the original was better, the remake from 97 was actually not that bad, considering the time period it came out in when there were a ton of really terrible scary movies that came out.
Yeah, I was going to say I have a funny story about the remake of House on Haunted Hill. Actually,
all right.
I think I might have been a senior in high school when that came out. And I went to see the movie with my friend Annie. And yes, I am also a giant chicken. I do when I was a teenager, I liked horror movies. And then like in my 20s, I decided I didn't. And then now my husband's getting me back into them. But anyway, we went and saw House on Haunted Hill, my friend and I. And you know so this was obviously before like digital and stuff. So things actually were on film. And I had popcorn. And when they started the movie up, it kind of made this like, zzz, kind of sound how like the projectors would do that when they would first start up. And that noise scared me. And I jumped and my popcorn went like flying in the air.
Oh my gosh, we're so old. I remember going to a movie with my parents and the film, I don't know what the term is, but like it broke. Like the physical film. And so they had to stop it. It was broken. And then they gave us all like tickets for a free movie or whatever. But I was like, how does that even happen?
Probably just because like they just got used so much maybe. And especially like in smaller theaters, like they probably couldn't keep some of the like projectors like as up to date. Maybe, I don't know. But yeah, that had happened to me too.
Something that would happen in like 1937. But like we're not that old,
No.
Like how did that happen in our lifetimes?
Yeah. Back to the show. Again, Lorelai and Max are doing an awful lot of talking during this movie, and I would be going insane if I was sitting with them or sitting anywhere near them. So rude.
This is kind of a thing for Lorelai. She always talks through things. So rude.
I would be like, if I walked in anywhere that I wanted to like see something and Lorelai walks in, I would just like turn around and leave.
You're like, there's no point.
I'm not going to hear anything. Yeah.
That's funny. So back at the mansion, Emily and Richard take their first bite probably ever in their entire lives of frozen pizza.
And they surprisingly love it. This was one of my favorite scenes from this episode. First, watching Emily trying to figure out how to eat pizza was great, going for the knife and fork. And then Rory's like, you can use your hands. And she's like, oh. And then, of course, Rory grabs the Parmesan cheese and freshly grates some for her, which apparently makes all the difference.
Apparently. Who knows? They probably have some hoity-toity Parmesan cheese direct from France or something.
Probably.
So Rory runs up and grabs the photo album from Lorelai's old room. And then the three of them have a lovely time reminiscing for a little bit.
Until Rory comes across a photo of Lorelai in her ill-fated coming out gown, and we learn that she never made it to the debutante ball because she was pregnant.
And then, of course, predictably, the wasps get uncomfortable and they flee from the table because, they're starting to get the feels.
Yeah, let's not talk about it.
No, we can't talk about it.
Conceal, don't feel.
Exactly.
And then also during the scene, we find out that Emily used to have a huge crush on Errol Flynn, who was the Cary Elwes of his day in terms of how handsome and dashing he was.
And Richard says Emily even tried to get him to grow a little mustache like Flynn had, which is interesting because, as fans of the show know, later on in the series, Richard does grow a mustache and Emily hates it with a passion. She's always making fun of it and calling him like a cocaine dealer or something. And by the way, I had to look up Errol Flynn, right? I did a mini deep dive, but it was just for me. Turns out he wasn't that nice of a guy. But anyway, he did look almost exactly like Cary Elwes. It's so crazy. Very, very handsome. I had a huge crush on him as a kid, Cary.
Yeah.
Huge.
Oh, he's very handsome.
Yes, he is.
Princess Bride, was that where you got?
Yeah. Well, no, I actually got mine from Robin Hood Men in Tights.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And his accent is so beautiful and just love him.
Maybe I'll have to find a picture of Errol Flynn and Carrie Elwes and I can like post them or something in our socials. Well, then we see Luke glaring at the reenactors through his window. And then he decides to bring them all coffee because they're clearly freezing. And at first, Harry refuses to take the coffee, but he eventually relents. And then everyone else begins giving him orders, with Kirk requesting an herbal tea. Of course, he'd have to be difficult.
Right. And I feel like Luke was really nice to him about it, which is unusual.
Yeah, I know.
And while all this is happening, Luke spots a giggling and kissing Lorelai and Max, and you can see that he's not loving what he's seeing.
No.
Poor guy. Then Lorelai and Max arrive at Lorelai's house, and she kind of freezes, and she tells Max that she's never actually brought a man home since she had Rory. And personally, I don't get what the big deal is because, Rory's not even home, and Lorelai knows she's not home. So, get in there and, do your thing.
I thought you were going to say, get it on.
Get it on. Shoot.
Yeah, I think maybe it's just the fact that it's just so new for her that, it's just like, wait, this is something I've never done before. And, maybe it's just taking her a minute because eventually she does agree to let him in for a cup of coffee. But I mean, come on, we all know what that's code for.
Yeah.
And I do applaud them for at least attempting to make coffee before they start making out.
I find every scene with them tedious, but yeah, I gotta say, this is one situation where I can kind of see the benefit of living where it's freezing out because you'd be like, what? I had to invite him in and he was cold. So things are getting all hot and heavy, and Lorelai and Max attempt to make their way up to her room when Lane suddenly appears out from Rory's bedroom.
She's clearly super embarrassed to have interrupted their sexy time, but she really could have seen them and run away before they even noticed her.
Instead, she just kind of stands there
just like gawking.
I know. Then Lane runs off to Rory's room and she promises not to come back out, but Lorelai goes to talk to her instead, and she gets Lane to open up about why she's so upset.
I really liked the scene because I don't think we get much Lane and Lorelai solo interactions. And Lorelai was so good at relating to Lane and making her feel better about the embarrassing moment from before.
Yeah, she says, everybody screws up. It's what you do with the screw ups and how you handle the experience. That's what you should judge yourself by. And that always reminds me of what we tell Zoe, my daughter, which is the failure is not in the falling down, but in the staying down.
Yeah. So Max appears to have gone ahead and made himself some coffee while Lorelai was with Lane because he's drinking some when she rejoins him in the living room.
Lorelai tells him that she's letting Lane spend the night, and so he needs to sleep on the couch. Why?
This I can kind of understand because, first of all, it's not even Rory that's there. It's her daughter's best friend. So I can understand her not wanting to like get it on with her boyfriend while, her daughter's best friend is alone in their house. Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like this is so 20 years ago. Like, I feel like people were a little bit more, scandalous,
But before going upstairs, Lorelai runs her fingers through Max's hair. I thought it was funny. She clearly enjoyed it.
Oh, yeah. So the next morning, Lorelai is woken by Rory being dropped off bright and early. And so she runs downstairs to warn Rory that Max is in the house because he spent the night.
Rory goes into the kitchen and begins to freak out, understandably. And I have some interesting background catches for this one, too. So the first thing is she walks into the kitchen and she goes straight for the coffee maker and she gets a mug to pour herself some coffee. Now, my first question was, who made it? Has it been sitting out all night?
So I got to say, as lazy and poor people in my 20s, we used to drink day old coffee. If it was there from the day before, we just leave it in the pot.
Okay. And then when she's stressing about whether or not he'd been in the bathroom, she gestures to the downstairs bathroom from the previous episode, which we have discussed does not exist later in the show. And then finally, after all of that, she goes back to the coffee maker and grabs another mug and pours coffee into that one.
What do you think that's about?
I'm guessing probably just, Rory is so like stressed out and there's so much like she's so anxious about Max Medina's in her house and this is really weird for her and that's probably what it is. Like she probably doesn't realize what she's doing, would be my guess.
So you think it was like an intentional choice by the actress?
Maybe, because I feel like that would just be really bad stage direction.
Yeah, right. Or maybe it was one of those like continuity things where she didn't grab it the first time and then she did grab it the second time and then they edited it funny or something.
Yeah,
I
maybe.
don't know, but that is weird.
Mm.
So then Rory she says that she just wants her mom to be happy. And since she knows that Lorelai isn't a cat person, she truly will be alone if she doesn't find herself a man. Little do they know, there's going to be a Paulinka someday.
And I would just like to say, as a cat person, that I don't appreciate the negative connotation of being a cat lady.
It's true. You're a cat lady and you have a husband.
Yeah, I am a crazy cat lady. I will fully admit it, and I'm proud of it.
I got to say, knowing Lorelai, she's not a cat person. She really isn't.
No,
She's a dog person, 100%.
Yeah, I can understand that. Not everybody's a cat person.
No.
That's fine. So then Lane comes out of Rory's room and Rory apologizes for the disconnected call. And then Lane tells her that she understands that Rory has this great new life now and she doesn't feel like she fits in. And she admits that she's a little jealous.
And Rory assures her that she does fit in and she apologizes for making her feel left out. And she promises to put Lane first in the future, which I think is baloney because everyone knows when you have a boyfriend, he comes first. But yeah.
What about sisters before misters?
No, not in high school.
So then Rory sees Max and Lorelai talking and laughing on the couch, and she looks a little sad, and she pulls out the photo booth photo of her parents. And I was wondering what she's thinking there. Like, is she feeling disappointed that her mom seems to be moving on with someone else? And in this big way, like, even bringing somebody to her house?
Yeah. Well, spoiler alert. So I think, there's a part of her that wishes her parents would get back together. But over time, Rory realizes that Christopher is a piece of crap and he's not right for her. And she even tells Lorelai that after, spoiler alert, again, they get married and then they get divorced really quickly. I don't know if you remember the last season. She basically says, I'm not surprised that you guys got divorced, basically, because they were never really right for each other.
Mm-mm.
And that was season 1, episode 8, Love and War and Snow.
We hope you enjoyed it. Tune in next time for Rory's Dance.
Copper boom.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review and share with your friends.
If you have any questions or comments, if you feel like we left anything out or got anything wrong, you can find us on Instagram and TikTok at the Gilmore Gals Pod. And we also have a Facebook page.
Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any future episodes.
Copper boom!